All right, so let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll just I think a few more folks are rolling in, but let's start the presentation. So hopefully you'll enjoy today's presentation. I think it should be an interesting topic, your new digital business and APIs. My name is Tyson Whitten. I'm the Director of Solutions Marketing at CA Technologies. And so I think the topic should resonate with a lot of folks in the audience. You know, if you look out at your daily lives, digital is everywhere, whether it be social usage or, you know, businesses trying to differentiate through mobile apps or the way that you're engaging with your banks. You know, consumers are coming to expect a different experience and a way of doing business. And so today what we want to cover are some of those steps that you want to look at in terms of making that change to a digital business, the platforms that make sense to investigate, some examples of customers that have made that transition. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. I think the first thing would be, if you have any questions, just submit them through the chat mechanism within WebEx, and then hopefully we should be able to get to them at the end of the presentation. And then if you want the PowerPoint, that should be available through the presentation or through WebEx as well at the end of the presentation. So again, thanks everybody for joining, and let's get started. And so I guess the first question would be, what makes up a digital business? And you know, like I was starting to go through, not every company obviously is a digital business. And if you look at what Gartner's stating in the top right, is that organizations have to act fast or they threaten their business. You know, as I was stating before, digital is everywhere, whether it be social usage increasing, or whether it be differentiation in the marketplace, or there's just the different expectations of consumers and the way that they work with different vendors, that, you know, digital is everywhere. And so, you know, what makes up that digital marketplace? What makes up the digital economy that we're in today? And so in general, a digital business is an organization that has embraced the way that we describe what is the open enterprise. And so what the open enterprise is this transformation that's happened within our enterprise, within our organization. It's the way that businesses are starting to incorporate these new trends. And so these trends could really range from social to mobile to cloud to big data. It's also taking into account the increased threats that are then targeting our enterprise as well, given the fact that we're opening up our boundaries and we're starting to do business in a different way. And so really a digital business is a way to embrace this new open enterprise. And as you start to look at these trends, there's significant opportunity. And there's a lot of growth. And you can look at 79% of organizations are using SaaS, 1.28 billion monthly Facebook users. On average, there's 25 business apps per device. The number of APIs continue to grow. Last time, I think last month, it was at 11,000 plus. The connected devices, that's going to surpass the number of users or humans that they're actually connecting through, right? So when you're looking at 50 billion devices by 2020, and then obviously that start to open up ourselves to some increased types of attacks as well. And so the thing to think about here is that this obviously provides an opportunity, but the ones that fall behind in investigating and taking advantage of these trends will lose their competitive advantage. And so not every business is ready to do so. And so another interesting quote from Gartner is that they predict that a lack of digital business competence will cause 25% of businesses to lose competitive ranking by 2017. Which is significant. And so I guess the question then becomes, what steps do you need to take in this new digital world? What do you need to do so that you can stay competitive, or that you can increase your competitiveness? So we can go through some of those. They're not too different from any strategic analysis that you need to perform on your business, but it's in the context of digital. It's about assessing business performance. It's about developing the right digital strategy. It's about acquiring the right talent from an executive as well as from an employee perspective. And then it's also selecting the right technology and platforms in order to execute. So the first step is around assessment, the digital business assessment. And so you can go through this and multiple different ways. And you can hire an external third-party consulting agency to do a pretty in-depth type of assessment. But if you just want to get a quick high-level understanding of where you line up from a digital standpoint, a good way to do that would be by assessing 3 different components within your organization. The first would be internal, right? So how did your business measure up internally as it relates to digital? And so some questions that you could ask are the same products or services, the largest revenue generators for the past 5 years, and then you want to understand the implication from a digital perspective. Is that inhibiting innovation? Or has the market share of your product slipped by a certain percentage, say 5% or so in the past couple of years? And are customers leaving because of that? I mean, the answers to these questions start to formulate where you are positioned from a digital perspective. And so the first step is internal. Second step is customers. Starting to understand how you're kind of providing the appropriate level of engagement to your customers from a digital perspective. One way to measure that would be measuring traffic to your website. Is web traffic being reduced by a certain percentage over the last couple of years? Is it dropping off for certain reasons? I mean, do you notice that the marketplace or customers or prospects that are engaging with your website are engaging through mobile? And do you notice a direct drop-off after they engage through mobile? And so the questions to these answers start to kind of formulate where you are from a digital perspective. And the last is competitors. So where do your kind of competitors stand? Have your competitors' products improved recently? Are your competitors accessing new markets you never even thought of, right? And then are they marketing through different channels as well, and why? And so you start to go through this high-level assessment, starts to kind of give you an understanding of where you are, and then helps you formulate a digital strategy to move forward. So the next step is selecting that digital officer, and I'm sure that you've heard this title in the past, right? So the role is typically described as a chief digital officer or CDO, but this position can come in multiple titles, and so these titles can span from digital strategist to digital marketing officer to a digital general manager. The idea here is that this role or these titles could probably be around for the next 5 or 10 years, but they're essentially interim positions. The reason for that is because at the end of the day, digital is going to be part of what we do as far as everything that we do, part of everything that we do, and by making a single or kind of separate role dedicated to this, it may be inappropriate. So what you'll have here is these specific titles. They may have other responsibilities, but their focus for the interim will be around digital and driving your business and executing on your digital strategy around digital. And so from a digital strategist perspective, obviously, advisory position in terms of the board or CEO or other executives, but having a good grasp of the digital trends within the marketplace, and then how that could directly impact or influence your business. The next, the digital marketing officer, again, having a good and deep understanding of the emerging trends from a digital perspective, but obviously responsible for an end-to-end marketing strategy. And so they would then be responsible for designing and creating a digital products and markets and channels. We can go through that a little bit in some follow-up slides to get a little bit more detail around kind of what that means and kind of the evolution of the marketplace in this new digital economy. And then finally, the digital general manager. And so this is essentially the business unit CEO of online or digital business units. And so again, these could be interim positions. When you start to kind of think about, okay, so where is my chief digital officer? It may not have that specific title, but it may kind of roll into one or multiple titles that I just went through. So that's essentially the second step. And then the third step is finding the right digital skills. And so, human resources, they may have to evolve the hiring practices from a digital perspective. One way to think about this would be, how you develop these skill sets internally versus how you acquire them. So develop on the left-hand side versus acquire on the right-hand side. So that could span from establishing different knowledge areas or areas of best practices to developing evangelists within your organization, to creating matrix types of virtual teams as well. And then the other would be through acquiring. So acquiring digital startups in which the employees have been digital and understand digital from the day the company was born to coming up with different recruiting and hiring tactics in order to kind of support your digital hiring objectives. So once this is laid out, you understand where you are, where you fit from a digital standpoint, where you have the right leadership in place, you have the right employees in place. What is the platform that you need to create, or what is the platform, or what are the solutions or products that you have to take into account in order to apply the right mix of digital assets to stay competitive? And so that directly relates to the initial assessment that you would have went through, right? It goes back to that analysis. So what are the outcomes? What are the business objectives based on that analysis? Do you need to accelerate application release cycles? Do you need to differentiate your service versus the competition via a better user experience for your consumers? Do you need to be able to provide them multi-channel access over the channel of their choice, whether it be web or mobile, in order to do business and consume services? Do you need to be able to access information outside of your organization to help you in your innovation initiatives? Do you need to be able to reach new markets, right? To kind of expand your market opportunity. And then you need to do things a little bit differently on the back end, just in terms of how you manage your supply chain. So all of these have to be taken into account, as you start to determine and prioritize how you want to start leveraging those different trends that I went through up front within the presentation. So this is an interesting quote from McKinsey. And so McKinsey went through a survey. They surveyed C-level executives. And so what the C-level executives came back as it related to what their digital priorities were is that, namely, it was across three different areas: big data, analytics, digital marketing and social media tools, and then the use of delivery platforms such as cloud computing and mobility, right, as their strategic priorities at their companies. And so when you start to look at these, they have direct linkages between them. And so what you have is this digital platform that begins to emerge. You see connectivity points between each of these priorities. For instance, the first would be around identities. How are you engaging with your marketplace? How are you engaging with your customers? How are you trying to onboard them? Are you onboarding them through social identities and social media? How are you delivering services to them? What are their behavioral needs? What are their requirements? And that directly maps into how you want to design your mobile apps, right? And so you can start to see the linkage here in terms of how users need to gain access through these mobile apps while delivering them a optimal user experience. And then how are they accessing information, right? So how are your apps and your users accessing this data on the back end? Or how is information being collected from your consumers and then analyzed to be used for big data usages, such as marketing to your employees or gaining insights into the information that's being collected from your marketplace. But there's a connectivity point between that app and between your data, and that connectivity point is the API. The API provides the ability for these new native mobile apps to be able to connect back and provide seamless access into this information. And so what happens is you start to see this digital platform emerges in which you start to tie together identities, apps, data, and through APIs. But APIs, besides connectivity, they have kind of fundamental advantages and benefits that they will provide to your business as you start to meet the objectives of kind of your digital strategy. The first would be that user experience, is that the game has changed in terms of how consumers want to access information and how they want to do business. They want a better user experience. They want specific, discrete functions within their mobile app. It's not the same heavyweight web application in which you provide all features and functions to them. They want to get in, get out, and perform the task that's necessary for them. And so that is very much part of an overall user experience requirement for users as part of the new digital economy. The next is you want to be able to reach new markets, right? So the API provides that ability to extend reach and provide access to new markets. And so here's some examples and kind of bringing that to life a little bit more, what I mean, that the traditional or kind of existing web application approach would be providing that functionality, whether it be a presentation or kind of business logic or kind of information access at the web layer. But the API starts to separate those responsibilities. It starts to push out the ability to push out the design or the presentation layer, as well as the business logic, to the app developer. So they can focus now on the behavioral needs of the user. You know, what is an optimal user experience to my customer base or to my employees, and focus there. Whereas the API now just provides that finite or discrete or kind of chunks of information that web app or that app developer can then develop an app that can then access that information. So it starts to separate those responsibilities. And then while providing additional market access. So now what happens is you have these different apps through different forms. It could be through a car or through a refrigerator or just through a mobile app, and be able to kind of distribute the ability to access this information in terms of multiple forms in multiple applications. And so what starts to emerge is not just a digital platform, but an agile digital platform. It's the ability to reach new markets. So not just your users, but different machines, television, refrigerators, cars. It's the ability to enable multi-channel engagement, whether it be through a web application or a native app. It's the ability to provide or deliver the acceleration of mobile app development. So by exposing and externalizing these services in the way that you can through an API, it provides a simple way for developers to access information, understand the information, and then develop apps that connect back to this information. And then obviously a way to seamlessly connect information that you can then provide out to your digital ecosystem. And so as you start to kind of think about how you would then invest or kind of select these different solutions as part of that digital platform, the API obviously becomes fundamental to that, and so fundamental that you can monetize it. You can make money leveraging the API. And so how can you make money? How can you monetize APIs? Again, it starts with going back to the market. Who are you providing services to? Right, that you're providing services to your employees, partners, and customers. And so that's important information to understand as you start to go through the design process of your API. Because based on that information, whether it is kind of an employee, that could then result in you designing an internal API. If it's partners and customers, that could then result in you having a different design approach in which you then want to design a private or an open API. But then that moves us into data. So understanding your market's obviously important, but maybe even more so is understanding what's the value of the information that you want to expose. What's the quantifiable value of this information, especially as you start to think about pricing out the information that you want to externalize through an API. And so first, it's about understanding your core competencies. What business are you in? And then by understanding that, you can then start to understand what's the value of this information. And so when pricing out data, it's not unlike how you would price out your standard products and services that you go to market with. The same way. I mean, quantifiable value really comes down to understanding the value across two different columns here. It's costs as well as revenue. And so understanding the cost value of the information that you're providing out to developers and to different customers. Do you provide capacity constraints value? Is there worker productivity value? Are you providing some type of equipment or inventory value in terms of kind of the information that you're providing out to your marketplace? Is there a revenue-driven value? Are you allowing your customers to go to market faster? Are you allowing them to differentiate their products? Are you improving customer loyalty gains? And so at the end of the day, it's really the net of this cost-driven and revenue-driven value that allows you to kind of come up with a total economic number that you can then apply to price. And so that's an important part in terms of understanding how you want to go to market with your APIs. And so once you start understanding that, one, who you're delivering services to, and and then 2, the value of that information, you can start applying them to different business models. And so from a business model perspective, you can think about them across these 4 different areas. One is free, direct, indirect, and internal. And so from a free perspective, this is essentially just that. So it's driving usage of an API, not specifically charging based on the usage of the API or the transactions within the API, but it's in support of an adjacent business. The next is direct. So this is when you charge a developer. So charging the developer based on the value of the API and then consuming the information from the API. The third is indirect, so that is when you pay the developer. So the ability for the value here is, again, similar to just how you would go to market outside of an API paradigm here, is that you're going to market indirectly, and your partners are driving usage, or they're driving the purchasing of your products and services. And so there's a pull-through here in which you would then pay the developer. And then finally, internal. So this is not necessarily monetizing the API directly at all, but the API is essentially fundamental to the product or the service that's being delivered. Let's go through some examples. So that then equates to the price structures that you then create as it relates to the business models that I just went through. So for a free business model, it's pretty straightforward. If it's a free business model, there's really no price structure there. Some examples of free business models would be obviously Facebook in terms of them exposing identity information through APIs. Another could be in the government. So it could be the U.S. Postal Service, for instance, in which they want to expose shipping information through different websites and apps to assist you in terms of shipping your products and services. The third would be, which I like, one because I am a customer, is Sonos. So if you're familiar with Sonos, they're a wireless speaker company. What they've done is they've created an ecosystem, a content ecosystem or music ecosystem in which they've opened up their APIs for folks like Pandora or Spotify to provide their content through their speakers. So by doing that, they're creating a better experience and overall experience and usage of their technology, of their speaker system, because of all the choices that customers have in terms of the content and where they want to source that content and music from. And that allows them to then hopefully drive more sales within their speaker business. The next is thinking about going back to the direct model in which the developer pays. Different price structures here could be cut across non-segmented, so this would just be a flat rate that could be charged, versus tiered, which is really what we see the most of in the marketplaces. There are these tiered models in which it can be broken out in terms of by product, and that could be a freemium type of model, anywhere from kind of free to high based on the value of what you're trying to provide access to in terms of what you're providing access to your developers. It could be volume-based, so the number of calls per day that are being made. It could be based on peak load. So, how much is your usage of APIs higher one part of the day versus the other? It could be metering, so it's really strictly usage. So, how much are you consuming? Right? So you kind of pay per transaction would be another way to think about that, or location-based. So that could be geographically based. So, who are you providing? Where is the developer located in terms of, or the business located in terms of what's being consumed here from a customer perspective? That's another way to kind of tier out these different price structures. And some examples here would be Google. So Google, obviously, they provide direct access to Google Maps for free, but as you start to provide additional services to businesses, they then want to charge for that. So that's a perfect example of a freemium model. PayPal, it's a good metering model just in terms of transactions. So it's a payment gateway. So for every transaction, you want the developer to pay for that. And then you also have here, you have Weather Underground, just in terms of a tiered pricing structure based on volume. So you can think about the different tiers in terms of Stratus, Cumulus, and Anvil, but based on the volume or the calls per day or the calls per minute, you want to capture that value within those specific tiers and then price appropriately. The third price structure here would be revenue-based or affiliate revenue shares. And so this maps directly to the indirect model in which developers get paid. So examples here would be Expedia. They've made billions in terms of their revenue sharing model. Amazon's always a good one to point out here as well. And so this would be a developer that's gaining access to an API and then pulling business through. So this could be, say, through a website. So for every transaction or every product that's being purchased through Amazon, it could be, if you kind of look at from electronic products all the way up to game downloads, there's a different amount of money that you would then pay the developer, and that could be based on just how much margin is available or the value of the products themselves. And so for every time that a product is purchased, the developer gets a percentage of that overall purchase. And then the last is internal. So this is where you're not necessarily charging or paying for each usage of the API, but the API just becomes core to the business model and core to how you're doing business. This could be, for instance, eBay acquiring content within its website to sell products. It could be CA Technologies, just in terms of, even with our CloudMinder solution, in terms of how we provide services through APIs. Another is a customer of ours in Alaska Airlines, in which they leverage APIs to develop consumer apps. So apps in which you can you can provide information around scheduling, boarding pass information to their consumers to provide a dynamic experience around how they should be understanding what's available to them from a flight perspective. So there's a lot of different ways in which organizations are leveraging their APIs and not necessarily monetizing each transaction of the API. But as we went through that, let's just go through some examples of what businesses have made that transition to digital. And so I think we've gone through some of the steps that that you have to take into account when, in terms of assessing the business and acquiring the right skill sets within the organization, and then acquiring the right technology, and then even how you monetize that from an API perspective. But what are some examples of some businesses that have made that transition? So since not every business is a digital business, there is a transformation that has to take place if you want to make that move. First is Netflix. So Netflix is always a good example to bring up, just in terms of a transformation to digital. And so what is Netflix core business here? It's about content. It's about providing, say, movie content through DVDs. And so the way that they did business traditionally was through the delivery of DVDs through the mail, and then competing with folks like Blockbuster. But they were a pioneer, and they went digital. They found different distribution models in which they could then provide content through thousands of different devices. So anywhere from Xboxes, to your tablets, to your iPhones, just a different distribution model in which you can gain access to a much broader market by taking advantage of APIs. And so now they see themselves completely redefining this market space and then competing with new competitors such as Amazon or Hulu or HBO. And so they now find themselves in a completely new marketplace and competing with new competitors. The next is Tesco. So this is a retail organization, grocery store, grocery chain. And so their core products are tangible. They're food. So they have to deal with the same shelf space and inventory management challenges that most grocery stores have to deal with. But they changed the game. They became a digital company by combining mobile apps, by combining advertising and a different checkout strategy. Essentially what they were able to do was provide apps to customers at the point of decision making, and at a perfect place, a perfect location in which customers wanted to gain access to this type of information to make a decision point and make a purchase. And this is the airport. So the use case here would be you're a traveler. You go to the airport. Maybe you're gone for a week, and you don't want to have to deal with maybe shopping when you get home or any type of spoilage issues of food while you're away. You would then select what products that you want to purchase from Tesco through these different kiosks through a mobile app on your phone, and then when you get home, the food would be delivered to you. So there's multiple advantages here, just from an access to product perspective, an advertising standpoint, and then just overall kind of premium service delivery the customer was able to experience. And then on the back end, Tesco was gaining advantages as well, just in terms of different, not having to manage shelf space in terms of tangible products, and then creating an easier way to manage back end inventory. The next is Nike. So I like that the Nike is a great example as well. And so just like Tesco in terms of their core product, it's tangible. Their core products are apparel and shoes. But what they want to do is change the game in terms of how they marketed to their customer base. So traditionally, what Nike would do is they would take an elite athlete marketing strategy. So they'd market to Tiger Woods or Lance Armstrong or was it Pretorius. And so obviously they had issues with those athletes, and so they established a different marketing strategy through data. And so what they were able to do is provide their consumers with a way to share information, fitness information, with their peers and promote products and services through a peer group, not necessarily through elite athletes. So they redefined the way that they were going to market and collecting information from consumers and then leveraging that information and then applying that to a direct marketing model. So for instance, through wearable devices. So they're able to take advantage of their fuel band and customers using the fuel band, and it could be through different movements or what have you, and then understand those movements and then apply them to how they want to market to them. So for instance, the fuel band could be profiled as somebody, or the individual using the fuel band could be profiled as somebody that's a runner or a tennis player. And then maybe you want to market to them a little bit differently. You want to market to them based on running shoes, or you want to market to them based on tennis rackets. And so, then Nike starts to see different competitors that come into place as well, such as Fitbit or Jawbone, in terms of these wearable devices. And so they now see themselves in somewhat of evolved marketplace. Some things and this may change. It's I've heard some recent decisions that Nike may be making as it relates to this fuel band, in which they may partner with Apple and their iWatch and some future wearables. But so they might have to share the stage just in terms of some of the value that their customers are receiving from this through some of Apple's wearable technologies. But they would still leverage the information to kind of continue this different marketing strategy that they've been executing for the past couple of years. And then finally, it's the auto industry. GM is one example here in which traditionally a core business obviously is cars and maintenance and providing service as it relates to the car. But the auto industry, which was trying to solve a problem. And the problem is that after the point of purchase, typically, and you can relate to this, is typically it's a negative experience. So you purchase the car, you gain valuable utility by using the car, but after the point of purchase, when you go back and engage with the car manufacturer or the dealer, it could be a negative experience. You're paying for parts or you're paying for service. And so what the auto industry and what GM wanted to do is they want to improve that post-purchase experience. They want to be able to sell more cars to return customers. And so by doing that, they need to provide a more optimal experience after the point of purchase. And so, what's one of the ways that they're able to do that? It's through connectivity. And so you heard of this evolution of the connected car. And that's exactly what this is that they wanted to improve the entire customer life cycle, all the way from improving the acquisition of customers by leveraging social identities across mobile and the web, but also post-purchase by providing a constant connectivity between the customer and the car. And so that connectivity could have been through the mobile phone, in which you then provide access from the driver directly to the car to do things such as remote unlock or lock or start the car or gain diagnostic information within the app, to different types of information within the infotainment system from an entertainment perspective or from a diagnostic standpoint. So just some examples in the way that the auto industry is going digital and providing value-added services to their consumers so that they can improve loyalty and then sell more cars when it's time to purchase another vehicle. So, what does the future behold here? So I think we went through a bunch of customer use case or company use cases rather. And so what does the future behold as it relates to connectivity? How is connectivity going to evolve? And so some of these things I'm going to go through are in play today, some are in the future, but it's not out of the realm of possibility to kind of think about yourself. You go to the Nike store and then you make some purchases. And so for instance, you might purchase the fuel band, and then on the way home, within your car, you start to share information. And from the car, you start to share information with your insurance company. Why do you share information with your insurance company? Well, for usage-based reasons, to reduce your premium. Insurance companies now want to leverage that information from the driver so that they can provide more accurate rates based on the profile of the driving habits. While you're still driving home, Nike decides to market some products to you. Maybe they decide to market some triathlon shoes to you based on the profile of you as a consumer within Nike. And then before you get home, your car decides to alert your utility company, because when you get home, you want the heat to be on, you want the lights to be on, and so you start to share information between your car and the utility company so that you can receive that additional value directly within your house. Or maybe you want your Sonos system to be turned on. You want the music to be turned on as soon as you open the front door. After you get home, you decide, I want to go for a run. I want to take my fuel band out, go for a run, test it out, and then over time, that information becomes valuable. That information becomes valuable around how you're performing or how you're improving your health, and that information also becomes valuable to other entities, and that entity could be somebody like your health insurance company. And so they may want to leverage that information so they can profile you better and then offer you discounted rates around your health insurance. Or maybe you want to be able to provide that to your doctor, so which your doctor can then apply that to your annual physical exam, and then kind of gain real-time information about you that can be applied to how they want to diagnose or put you on a future plan for improvement. And then maybe that information even becomes valuable in terms of providing recommendations for you in terms of your diet. Maybe it can be applied to your profile within Tesco or within the grocery store that you want to go to, so that you can receive recommendations around the types of food that you should be eating to improve your health. And so none of these are out of the realm of possibility. A lot of them are happening today. And so, but as you can see with this is very complex. There's a lot of connectivity. There's a lot of integration requirements. There's a lot of privacy issues that come along with this as well, and security issues. And so, with that, there are, and just to finalize the presentation, there are a few different things that you should be thinking about to make this a reality. The one is you need to think about continuous app delivery. With this integration, with this expectation from the consumer and from a user experience perspective, there's really no option for downtime. You need to be able to refresh software continuously, and downtime is really not an option anymore. The next is integration. So, as new apps are rolled out, old apps don't die, and so you need to be able to provide the right level of integration across these kind of new apps that are being rolled out, as well as some of the legacy applications that you have, within your organization, and then across your entire value chain. The third is context and act real time. So you need to be able to collect, analyze, and respond to information based on this data collected. So you can see a lot of information is being collected, a lot of information is being shared, and you need to be able to mine and analyze that information so that you can respond and provide products and services to your customers in the way that they want. And then finally, obviously, there's a lot of privacy and regulatory issues that come up as part of this. And so you need to make sure that you're applying the right risk strategy and security strategy as it relates to this. And so you can't think about these things separately. You have to think about them together, and it is a balance. It is a balance around how you're driving your business forward in this new digital enterprise, but also how you're applying the right level of security and the reduction of risk. So with that, we can move on to some questions. Let's see if we have any any questions within the chat. Let's see. Give everybody a few minutes here. I think so. Here's one question that just came here. So could you explain more around how your company examples leverage the digital platform? So okay, let me think about that. So we think about the Netflix examples and the GM examples and Nike and Tesco examples. So what's the common theme around all of them? The common theme is around apps, and a common theme would also be around APIs. A lot of these companies are starting and understand that they need to be able to provide services the way that customers want to consume them, and that typically means through an app. Their customers want a better user experience, and that's coming through a mobile application. And so what is that mobile application connecting to? It's connecting through an API. And so when you think about the digital platform that I laid out, just in terms of identities, apps, data, and APIs, I'll say that each of those companies are leveraging kind of those core technologies in order to meet their business needs. Let's see here. So let's see if there's another one that's coming in. So how do you apply the right level of security not to inhibit business practices? So at CEA, our approach is you need to be able to balance. And I just started to go through that a little bit in terms of a balanced approach between not inhibiting business practices and providing the right level of security. And so I think as I went through earlier, we now live in an open enterprise. We have all of these digital trends that are happening. You can no longer rely on kind of keeping everything closed in. That's definitely not going to happen. So you need to be able to embrace these new digital trends. And so one of the core components or strategies our customers are investing in is around identity. We think of identity as kind of that primer, as that core component that you can apply across all of these different trends. One, to enable access to all of these different types of applications and services that you're providing, but also provide the right level of security and the right level of access control, which is extremely important in today's age. And so it really is that combination. It's about thinking about how you can accelerate business, how you can provide the right engagement to your consumers, but also about how can you provide that right level of security. And so with us being able to provide that fine-grained access control, and by focusing in on the identity of the individual or of the application or of the machine, that then allows you to provide that right level of balance. And another question just came in. So what standards does CA provide? I mean, as far as providing standard, so we leverage different standards or security standards such as OAuth and OpenID Connect, and so that there's a definite fundamental in terms of one, providing the right level of security, but two, providing the right level of experience for our users. So when you think about being able to provide, like I was mentioning before, the transition that customers are starting to expect now, they need a better user experience, they need more convenience, they need better personalization. And so one way to gain that is through by leveraging those standards such as OAuth or OpenID, so that you can provide them a more convenient experience, for instance, as they're trying to gain access to multiple applications within your business, say through single sign-on is one example, or the ability to leverage a social identity so that you can quickly onboard prospects and then bring them onto the system. So standards such as those allow you to apply that right level of security in business enablement. So just wait a couple more minutes, see if there's any more questions. I don't see any. So with that, we'll end the presentation. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Again, if you want to download the presentation, that's within the WebEx. If you have any additional questions, please reach out. My email address, tyson.whitten@ca.com, is right there in front of you. So if you want to reach out to me directly, keep the conversation going. If you have any direct questions for me, please do. Please reach out. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining today's presentation, and have a great day.